In this video, I'm going to show you how you can add the Octro monetization library to your existing Power-Up. This will include things like adding the dependencies, creating the API client, and then also adding the license indicator and the conditional rendering of paid for features into the app. So for this section, I'm going to use the Power-Up that I described earlier on. I'll just give you a quick recap of that. It is called Notes for Trello. It provides a very basic note-taking functionality. As you can see here, it shows that it uses card badges to show that cards have notes attached to them. This one here has 2 notes attached. You can see in the card back section that there are 2 notes attached. And finally, there's the card button here, which allows you to add new notes to a card. And this piece in particular, the card button, is where we're going to be implementing monetization in this example. And in this example, we're going to take the color functionality, which lets you change which color a note is, as indicated on the left here of each note. We're going to make this a paid for feature. And the purpose of this tutorial isn't that we're expecting you to create a Power-Up with a color picker that you make a paid for feature, but actually you could apply what I'm going to demonstrate here to any Power-Up and any feature by using both React components and React hooks to tell your app whether the user or the board truly has been licensed to use that feature. So first of all, let's jump to the source code. So I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. As you can see here, I've got my VS Code and I've got a very typical project layout with my source code in the source directory separated by capabilities, the Trello capabilities here. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to install a couple of libraries that we've created that will make your lives a lot easier. And you can do this with yarn or npm. So if you want to use npm, it would be npm install, and then the packages that I'm going to say later. But in my scenario, I'm going to use yarn add, and then I'm going to write the packages in. So the packages are Optro /API-client and Octro UI-React. And if you look under the video at the description, you'll see that there's a link to the documentation to get these, so you can copy and paste these instead. So there we go. You can see that that's now installed those 2 packages. And if I scroll down on my package.json, you can see them there. At the top there on line 19 and 20, we've added these 2 dependencies. Now, the next step that we need to do is obviously we need to use these libraries. Just because we've installed them doesn't mean that they're going to do anything. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a Optro license API client, which will provide access to the license status. So what we need to do, we're going to go into the root of our project, which in this case is the router.tsx. And inside here, I'm going to add some text. So again, the best way to follow along here is to use the README from the UI React package. Now that we've installed the dependencies required, next we can start to create the API client for the Octro license API. So this is the first thing that we need to do in order to tell our app how we can validate customers and their boards and validate whether we should be providing them a premium or the free experience. So what we need to do first is go into the root of our project, and now this could be different depending on your project, but for us it's in the router.tsx file. And what you need to do is, one of the libraries that we imported was the API client library. We are going to use that to create a client. So I'm going to type const Octro client. That equals a new Octro license API. You can see it's auto-completing, it knows we've imported that library. And the argument that this takes is the API key and the Power-Up ID. So for this step, what you'll need is your API key and your Power-Up ID. And let me show you how to do that, to get that now. So I'm going to create a constant for these. And we're just going to grab the API key from Octro. So if I pop back to my window here, click on my listing for my app in Octro Vendor that we created earlier on in the tutorial. And I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find the View Power-Up API Key section, and I'm just going to click this button to copy it. So now when I step back, I can paste in my API key here. And just remember that we wouldn't recommend storing these in the code. We'd recommend storing them in an environmental variable. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to just put them in nice and simple. So the second thing that you need is your Power-Up ID. And actually, this is something that you got earlier on as well from the Power-Up administration page here. So if you go onto your Power-Up, in the URL, you should see a nice alphanumeric identifier. And if you just copy that identifier, and that is your Power-Up ID. So those are the two unique identifiers that we need in order for our API client to be able to basically ask Octro whether customers are allowed the pro or the free features. Nice and simple so far. The next step that we need to do, there's a few providers. Now, providers are something in React which allow you to provide information to descendant components. For example, a provider could be at this level, on line 17, and any tag within it would have access to that data. So the first provider that we're going to add is the Trello provider. So I'm going to add at the top in my import line, I'm going to put import Trello provider from Octro UI React. And you can see there it's auto completed. And I'm going to put the Trello provider pretty much at the top. And I'm going to close that tag just at the bottom as well. And what you'll realize is Trello provider takes T, and you can see usually we get T by calling window.trellopowerup.iframe. However, you should only ever call this once. That's where the provider comes in. So the provider lets us provide this constant to any further down component without having to call this again. So let's change this to T equals T. And there you go. That's the Trello provider in there now. And if we want to use this T further down, there's something I'll go over later that lets you do that. That's a hook, which is called use provided Trello. The second provider that we need to create is the license provider. So on the next line after inside the Trello provider, we're going to put license provider. And you can either manually or automatically add this as a second dependency from the UI React library. So this license provider takes a few more parameters than the Trello provider does. So let's get those in first. So the first one is the Octro client. And you can probably guess that this is the one that we created just a little bit further up. It's also going to take in the API key. Again, we created this further up in the file. What license type you'd like your Power-Up to follow. So there's two options, board and user. And in this case, the most common one would be for people to license the board. So we're going to choose board here. And finally, the last one we need is Power-Up ID, which again, we set that up earlier on. The last thing to do now for the license provider is to take the opening tag here and exactly the same as the Trello provider, close that tag underneath. And then now we know everything inside here, which includes all of our routes and our components, these all have access to both Trello and to the license provider. So we're almost done with the route. The last thing that we need to do, and this will become evident later on, is import the styles that we need for our license status display. So on the top line here, line 5, I'm going to add another import, which is going to be importing the Octro UI React CSS bundle. So at this point, we've done a lot of the legwork, really. This is the top level piece of code. This is the React route. And we've added in all of basically the back office stuff that we need to actually get to the exciting stuff. At this point, now we get to move on to the exciting stuff, and we can start using these React context providers in the child components to show the license status to a user. Let's take a look at one of the descendants or the children components of this piece here. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be concentrating on the card button one. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to click into the card button file, which is here. And I mean, it's pretty evident what's happening here. We've got a description, a color picker, and then an area for some text. And just to jog your memory from before, we've got the paragraph of text, the color field, the text field, and then a button. And then if we go back over here, you can see we've got the color, the note, and the button. Our mission, whether we choose to accept it or not, is to now add monetization to that color picker. But first of all, we're probably going to want to show some kind of license status above this. So, for example, our users may not know that we have a premium feature in the app, and it's not a good idea to block a feature without providing an easy way for them to subscribe, for example. So let's put in a license status. On the first line, I'm going to open up a new tab. I might surround this with a div, and I'm going to put license status in there. And license status doesn't take any parameters because of those providers that we put in earlier. Nice and easy, right? Octro's made it very simple to get this license status display into the app. So maybe we should see what that looks like. It's going to reload. Click on add a note. And as you can see, we've got a banner showing up here that tells me that I'm on the free plan. Obviously this hasn't been styled perfectly, that the scroll bars appeared now, but this shows you the main functionality. So it's important that we give people a way of seeing that some functionality is a paid feature and giving them an easy way to upgrade their subscription. So that didn't take very long. Now we can move on to the license conditional. So the license conditional is similar to license status, but we can put it around a piece of code that we want to block from a free user. So I'm going to do a very simple example. So I'm going to put license conditional, and I'm going to close that tag. There we go. We've nested our license conditional in here. So what we can do now is in the props here, we can set an unlicensed display. So for example, I might want to say change the color with Pro. What this will do actually is the license conditional, if the user is fully licensed, it will show the inner children. And if the license conditional comes back that the user isn't licensed, it will use this prop here to show what we want. And you don't have to just have text. This is a DOM element, so you can put in anything you want in here. Images, pictures, styling, whatever you want. So let's see what happens now when I click on add a note. Now you can see I'm on the free plan. The color is no longer selectable here. I'm kind of stuck with the default color because that's what I've chosen. So all of your notes will be blue. So one of the things that we'd recommend that you do as you go along is checking that your components render properly. For example, you don't just want to take it for granted that this is working correctly and this is how it will display on a free plan. We might also want to see what this would look like by fixing it to a pro plan. So if you hop back to your React root file, again in my case this is router.tsx, and I go on to my license provider, you can see here there's a prop called override license. Now what this will do is it lets me fill in a override. As a developer, I may want to locally override what license this is. And as you can see, when I put this in, it auto-completes. Do I want it to be a free or a pro? So for testing, I'm going to put in pro. I'd like to see that color picker come back. So if I just do a quick save of this, and then Click add a note. Now you can see this is showing what this should look like if I was on the free plan. So again, I've got my color picker back. And I can click create. And the app works exactly how I'd imagine, but because I've paid for a subscription, or because I'm a developer, I've been able to change the color of that note. So I hope what this video has shown is just how easy and straightforward it is to set up monetization in your app and conditionally allow certain features to be premium features only. And just, it's very easy and extensible in this way. And so this was quite a basic, straightforward example. If you wanted to expand on this and do some more programmatic and complicated use cases here, what I'd recommend that you do is look at the UI React documentation here. Because if you scroll down the documentation, you'll see it explains how you can provide access to the monetization, how you can conditionally allow features, displaying it. But also one of the features that will come in handy would be to use the hooks here. So I can use a hook called use license. And what this lets me do is get direct access to the license state. So if I said, this license is licensed, I could do, if the user is licensed, I can print something nice, Obviously, you could use this for much more complicated use cases. You could block off features, you could show different information, you could run things automatically. Really, we've written this in such a way that it's extensible and you can use it however you wish. Thanks for listening. I hope this part of the tutorial is useful. And the next section we'll be talking about how you can take the power-up that you've just monetized and actually create a listing and get that on the Octro marketplace so that you can start making money.